welcome back to the Unapologetic Podcast. You've got myself, Brandt, Merritt, and
Jonathon, Woodyard.
We are your only host and guest. That's what happens when you try to combine words. Yeah. We are your only host and your guests this time. But Jonathon, you're kind of off-site today, and not just today, but for a couple of days at an event that I wanted to start off talking about that. Where are you? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm in California and at what's called the Evangelical Theological Society. Sounds fancy, but it's jokingly the gathering of nerds, Bible nerds and theology nerds once a year. That's what people call it. You get professors, different people, teachers, pastors, people that have pursued, doctoral work in theology, Bible, church history, things like that. Gather once a year, started back in 1949 as an opportunity for conservative evangelicals to come and share their scholarship, things they're working on. So you've got a few thousand people that converge at different cities once a year. So last year was San Antonio, this year here in San Diego, next year's in Boston. And once a year come together, and you're interacting with colleagues and listening to research on a lot of different things. So a lot of papers being presented, and you're kind of just making your way around to hear some of the things that are going on in your area, and try to learn, try to grow, try to keep up with what people are saying, things like that. So I've been here for a couple of days. Always stay with a friend when I come out, and have a good time of catching up with people, but also trying to just sharpen the skills on the academic side.
Well, you're right of the gathering. I saw a post today from Preston Sprinkle, who was presenting on something, and his comment was, presenting on this topic, and Wayne Grudem stands up to question your presentation. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that would be a little intimidating.
So what Sprinkle presented on, I didn't go to it. There's hundreds of papers being presented while here, but what Sprinkle presented on was kind of a assessment of a particular word in the New Testament, kephale, which means authority, but some think it means source. There's just a debate about what that word means. And Grudem, Wayne Grudem, author of Systematic Theology, that has sold, I think, 1 million copies or so. It's one of the most popular systematic theologies on the market for a long time. So he's always here at these meetings. But Sprinkle's responding to some of that research. And so Grudem had written the definitive study of that word several years ago. And now Sprinkle to offer a response and not expect a Wayne Grudem to show up would be, kind of silly. I mean, like, this is a major study that Grudem's the author of, and you're going to offer a reassessment. The guy's going to show up. So you got to be ready for that. Yeah. But Grudem's here, guys like that. D.A. Carson, he's walking around. I know you've appreciated some of his work recently. Mm-hmm. I was at a dinner the first night I got here. I'm part of a group of people that go to something called the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. President's Denny Burke, and you've got Colin Smothers, executive director. But they always have a dinner the night before ETS starts, and that this dinner this year they actually honored Grudem. He was a founding member. Him and John Piper, kind of a few others, started Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood back in the 20th century, so 1900s, long time ago. But back in the 80s or so. 1987, I think. So he was there, got to see him, honored. It was pretty cool. But things like that going on. But those things eventually make their way down into the churches, because that type of research makes its way into a commentary or a book that a pastor picks up, helps him read his Bible or to think through an issue, and then that makes it into a sermon or a discipleship class. So these things are kind of upstream of what goes on in the churches.
Yeah, I mean, real implications in the real world of the things that go through. And so you're not just attending, you're also presenting tomorrow. You've got a presentation on a topic. So what's that topic? Who are the heavy hitters who are going to be in your room that are going to, you'll have to answer their questions potentially.
Well, you never know who's going to show up, so that's always
Yeah.
it could be nobody, it could be it could be a lot of people. So I'm writing a response to a particular historian who had responded to another guy, kind of hero of mine a couple of years ago. So a little context, background. John Piper has written a book about the nature of saving faith. So we talk about how are we justified? How are we saved? And we say, we're saved by faith in Jesus Christ. And so the question is, what is faith? What does it mean to believe in Jesus? It's a big question that Christians have talked about for a long time. This is not new. You go all the way back into church history, and people are talking about what does it mean to believe? What are the component parts of faith? If you were to say, what are the ingredients, so to speak? And so John Piper kind of jumps into that conversation over the course of his ministry, really. But a couple of years ago, he published a book called What is Saving Faith? And in that book, he's arguing that not only does faith include things like knowledge, you have to know, to believe the gospel, you have to know something about the gospel. You have to agree with the gospel. I'm a sinner, need a savior. Jesus is the savior. I agree with those things. But it's also a trust. Faith also means trusting and embracing Jesus. And Piper agrees with all that, but then he comes in and also says that faith also includes an emotive, kind of emotional or affective element, an affectional element. And he calls that treasuring. We might call it love or delight, that it's a happy embrace of Jesus. It's a treasuring of Jesus. That's what faith is. That's a big, long book, and he does a lot of handling with Bible texts that I think are pretty convincing. But then he also, at the early part of the book, he tries to show that this is not new. Christians have said these things before. And so he quotes guys like John Calvin, John Owen. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of John Calvin. John Owen is another majorly important theologian in the 17th century. He quotes somebody like Francis Turretin, even more obscure for us, but really a massive name in what we would call the Reformed tradition. And so he quotes him and some other people. He's leaning heavily on Jonathan Edwards, who's an American theologian in the 1700s. And so Piper's saying, listen, what I'm saying about this is not new. Other people have said these things, that faith includes this kind of happy or loving embrace of Jesus. So he quotes these theologians in part of his book, and then Fesco, a guy named J.V. Fesco, who's a historian, theologian that actually down in your neck of the woods, Reformed Theological Seminary down in Florida. J.V. Fesco, I think he's in Florida. But anyway, he writes 2 years ago, he comes to this meeting that was in Denver at the time. He comes to this meeting and he debates Piper and says, you've misused John Calvin, you've misquoted him, you've misquoted John Owen, you've misquoted Francis Turretin, and so you got them out of context. They don't mean what you think they mean. And so what I'm doing 2 years later is I went back and tried to do some of the historical work and say, hey, was Fesco right? Did John Piper misquote these historical figures? And I'm going to argue that I think Piper is right and Fesco is wrong. I think he does use Calvin correctly. He does use John Owen correctly. He does use Francis Turretin correctly. So I'm trying to show that. Fesco's here, and so he may be in he and I talked yesterday, so he may be in the meeting and have some questions over the presentation. So I'll read that paper. Parts of it. I mean, it's 21 pages, so I won't read all of it. So present some of that research, really diving into kind of the big idea, trying to understand when we're calling people to believe in Jesus, which we do all the time, right? We do that in our churches. We do that at Southwest Baptist University in our chapels and in conversations. Locamente, we're calling people to believe in Jesus. We're calling people not only to hear the gospel, but to respond to the gospel. I'm asking and trying to press in my own research and trying to write a book on this as well. What does it mean to believe? What are we actually calling people to do? Because Christians have debated that over the years, and a lot of Christians have gotten that wrong. They've said things like to believe is to have mere mental assent. You simply agree with everything I just said about the good news of Jesus. Is that really what it means to savingly believe in Jesus, just to agree with it? Or is there more to it? And so I'm trying to dive into some of those discussions because I think it has real impact on the ground because we're calling people to believe in Jesus and to believe in a saving way. Because there is in the Bible people who believe who are not saved. One quick example, John 8. You go to John chapter 8 and you read that these people, the crowds, believed in Jesus. A few verses later, Jesus calls them children of the devil. So,
Yeah.
so if there are ways to believe that don't save, James, dead
Yeah, well,
faith.
even the demons know rightly who he is. I mean, it's
Yeah, they
just, yeah,
believe.
you're right.
Even the demons believe. So there's a way to believe that's not saving. There's a way
Yeah.
to believe that is, and I'm trying to hone in on and add some real help to understanding what it means to believe in a saving way. And church history helps us.
Yeah. Well, and it connects to, yeah, it makes sense that Piper, would have been the one to present that. I mean, just it's desiring God, it's the Christian hedonism
Yeah.
idea of he doesn't separate. And, I find it very compelling and true too, that the joy is almost inseparable from the faith itself. The love is almost inseparable from the faith itself. And, it's a very compelling thing that feels right, but it is more than maybe just what you think of the book knowledge when you just hear faith. So good luck to you on
Yeah.
that. We'll be praying for you for sure on that one.
Yeah. I mean, the JV Fesco, who I'm responding to, is world-renowned historian, particularly in the Reformation era, and brilliant theologian. So I don't walk in there pridefully. Actually, if he's there, I hope he can offer constructive feedback to things that I
Yeah.
present, and I'm happy to learn too. Part of this is just learning. Part of this, and the reason guys come here, I'm presenting my paper to gather feedback from
Yeah.
peers, and I don't really consider myself a peer of Fesco. So he'd be more of the teacher in the room. So if he can offer feedback and help sharpen my thinking, iron sharpening iron, that's a good thing, and hopefully just makes me better as a professor, because I also teach in our Redford School of Christian Ministry. I also preach in chapels, so hopefully makes me better, a better professor, a better preacher, better discipler as we're trying to disciple students. And so just all this is trying to sharpen my mind, sharpen my heart, and make me better at what I do.
Well, and it does connect to what we do on campus. And as we were talking about your topic, your paper, and how the nature of faith, the relationship of love and joy with it. One of the things that we talk about a lot, you've done a lot of work on how to implement some things to help with this on campus. You also just read a lot about it because it's very much a prime topic with students. But one of the major conversations with young adults and with college students in general is this idea of anxiety, the anxious generation, the book by Jonathon, which we've brought up before, but just in general, the conversations around, digital lifestyles. And I've been reading Carl Trueman's Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And just this idea of all these things have built to this point in time where we've got a generation who is very anxious, not sure how to navigate the world. In my realm of enrollment, students who don't feel like they're ready to go to college, students who don't feel like they're ready to leave home. They don't have this confidence that, and I would argue, you would argue is, my confidence to push against that in my own life is rooted in my faith, and it doesn't just give me, like this strength, but it gives me the joy to push against anxiety and fear and worry. It gives me this idea of love and connection. So one of the things I wanted to talk through a little bit with you is maybe starting there, how does the idea of saving faith and joy connect with the conversation around anxiety, just generally, but then really would want to get into a little bit, what are the things that we're doing on campus, the conversations that you have with students, and how we really try to create a culture on campus that I feel like we can uniquely do well, that pushes back against this anxiety and leans into this idea of joy through our faith.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And a lot of times it's, why are you anxious? What makes you worried? And one of the things, there's a lot of answers to that question. It's not monolithic. People are anxious for a lot of different reasons. Could be exams or grades or pleasing parents or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you're uncertain about your future. There's so many things that make people anxious, not just this generation, but you and me, right? We have,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have anxiety, I have anxiety, and the reasons you're stressed out are maybe not the same reasons I am, because we work together. Sometimes we're stressed out over the same things, right? But anxieties, people are anxious for lots of different reasons. It's not monolithic. But when you think about the gospel, when you think about Jesus, I think one of the things that the gospel does here is tell. And when I say the gospel, I don't want to assume that everybody knows what I mean. I think we assume one generation preaches the gospel, gets it right. The next generation assumes the gospel, and then the next generation loses the gospel. So I don't want to assume it. When I say the gospel, what we mean at SBU, what I mean, and I think what the Bible means, is the good news of Jesus Christ. Jesus was sent to this earth. He lived the life we could not live, never sinning, never stumbling, perfectly obedient to the will of the Father. He lives this perfect life, and then he goes to the cross and he dies in the place of sinners. That's you, me, and everybody that will believe. He dies in the place of sinners and bears the wrath of God on their behalf. And then 3 days he's buried, and 3 days later resurrected, ascends to the right hand of the Father, where he sits and intercedes for his people. So that's the good news, right? The good news is, if you will turn from your sin and believe in Jesus, embrace Jesus, you would be reconciled to a holy God. So that's the gospel. That's what I mean by that. And the reason I think that addresses so much of our anxiety is because it tells us, it makes it clear that your greatest problem has been solved. So whatever you're dealing with, whether it's work anxiety, whether it's relational anxiety, anxiety over your grades, your greatest problem is not your GPA. Your greatest problem in the world is not whether or not that boy or girl likes you. Your biggest problem is not enrollment numbers, right? Your life. My biggest problem is not how many discipline issues that I need to deal with. My greatest problem is sin. Your greatest problem, the world's greatest problem. Every student on our campus, every faculty and staff member on our campus, their greatest problem is sin. The fact that they are children of wrath. They're at enmity with God when they're born into this world, and that's solved at the cross of Jesus. He pays the debt. He wipes away their sin. He forgives them their sin. And now through Jesus, you can be reconciled to this God who loves you, cares for you, and I know it's cliche, has a wonderful plan for your life. Might be a hard plan, might be a lot of suffering in that plan, but has a wonderful plan that's going to issue in an eternity where there is no weeping, there is no gnashing of teeth, there's no crying, there's everlasting joy in heaven. So I think lots of reasons people are anxious. The gospel comes to bear. Jesus comes to bear on your problems and says, I've solved the biggest one. It's been crushed at the cross. And so I think if you can live there, if you can just come back there when you're having a hard day, it doesn't mean things don't matter. It doesn't mean, sorry. Somebody's calling me in the middle of this. Sorry.
It was bound to happen eventually, right?
Oh, right, yeah. It doesn't mean that things are hard. It just means that the greatest problem has been solved. So you can kind of step back, and you don't have to catastrophize every issue you're facing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if enrollment numbers don't show up the way you need them to, you have a kingdom that's coming. If I have an issue that's hard with students, there's coming a day where sin and wickedness and rebellion and hard things are put away. So I think that's where when I talk about the subject I'm talking about, saving faith, what does that mean to embrace Jesus? I think that addresses anxiety in the sense that when you embrace Jesus, when you believe the gospel, when you happily embrace Christ as a treasure above everything else, then everything else can be falling apart. Christ is your treasure. Christ remains the same, and it lowers the temperature in your soul. So I start there. I don't know where else you want to go, and I rambled a bit. Sorry about that. I got
No, it's good. Well, but where it connects then even more deeply to what we do on campus. If you're a young person and you're looking for college and you're viewing it as this place that is this major next step in my life, and maybe you're a Christian, maybe you're not, but even if assuming a Christian student and you're thinking about what kind of place am I going to be able to go to, and am I going to be able to not just be prepared for a career, not just find friends, not just find maybe a future spouse, not just get a great internship, all these kind of things you're trying to check the box, but then where else am I going to be in a spot that's going to help just deal with this worldview issue of anxiety? Because it is a pervasive cultural thing. And so, we've recognized that, you and your team have recognized that we really lean into this idea that the gospel in a Christian university has a unique voice, the true voice to speak to this ultimate issue and to help maybe share that message that you just did through all the different avenues that we're doing it. So what are some of the things that you guys have done in student life where you're taking this issue head on, where you're actually trying to not just dismiss? Because I think that is maybe something that the church has struggled with in the past, is maybe been a little too dismissive of anxiety, because it's easy to sit there and well, you shouldn't be anxious. Like you just said, the greatest problem's been solved. Just trust Jesus and you'll be fine. There's no reason to be depressed. There's no reason to have anxiety. So I think we've done a good job. Your team has done a really good job of trying to acknowledge the issue for what it is. I mean, it's a real thing that is affecting real people, and we can't just dismiss it. So we've done things to really address it head on and try to support students through it. So maybe just walk through what some of that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple of things you said are really important. One, we can't be dismissive of the reality of anxiety. Jesus knew that anxiety was real. I mean, he tells the disciples, right, let not your heart be troubled. Right. So he knows that there's a tendency of our hearts to be troubled. The writers of the New Testament know this. Do not be anxious, right? There's a call, don't be anxious. And when Jesus says, let not your heart be troubled, he says, you believe in God, believe also in me. So he points them back to himself. So anxiety is a real thing. The New Testament, the Bible knows it's a real thing. And so we don't need to act as if it's not a common human experience. But I think right there, even kind of acknowledging that it's a common human experience is helpful to students. It's helpful to people to say, if you're feeling anxious, that's a normal human experience. You're not weird. You don't panic. People have felt anxiety.
There's nothing wrong with you in that feeling of anxiety, right?
In the feeling of anxiety, yes, you're a broken individual because of sin, but anxiety is part of the human experience in a fallen world. So don't panic here. We can deal with this. We can get through this in different ways. So I think just being honest about the anxiety is important, and not just walking in and telling students to get over it, but to actually think through how can we care for people well. So some things that we've done to try to help here. One of the things that I did when I first got here is my lead team. I put together a lead team for student life. You have directors at different levels we have 9 or so different departments that report up. And so we've got people leading in each area. And I started to have biweekly meetings with them where we get together as a team and we think through student life. We think through things that are going on campus and where we want to go. And we always read books together. And so I'm a reader. I want people to be readers. I think leaders are readers. And so I want them to read and to think. And so when I first got here, the first book we read together was called The Coddling of the American Mind, another Haidt book, Jonathon Haidt. He wrote that. He co-wrote that with some guy. I can't remember the other guy's name. But tremendous book talking about the fragility of this generation and maybe some things that have led to that. Then we read another book, and then last summer we picked up another Jonathon Haidt book. That's The Anxious Generation that you've mentioned, and we started to think through some of those things. So and
Haidt, just to jump on Haidt real quick, he is a college professor. Like, so he's uniquely working with college students is kind of where that got on his radar.
Right. That's right. He sees these things in his everyday life and his work,
Yeah.
his profession, his vocation. He's not a Christian, but he's
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of true things. And we attribute that to the doctrine of common grace. God causes
Yep.
it to rain on the just and the unjust. He allows even unbelievers to see realities. And so through Haidt's work, he's kind of highlighting this kind of rise in anxiety, rise in depression. I think 143% increase or so over the last couple of years, and in things like anxiety, internalizing disorders. So we're reading those things. So, we can go off on Haidt another time, but the
Yeah.
point there is, what are we doing? Well, at the top, with your leadership, student life leadership, we're thinking about these things. We're reading, we're talking. It all has to start there. If we're going to come up with a plan how to help students navigate anxiety, we need to be thinking and talking and discussing these things at a high level with my lead team. So we're doing those types of things. And then some of what we did so just outside transcending student life for the larger university campus, we had a seminar on our back to school workshops that we do for faculty and staff before the semester starts. This year, we had a section where Kevin Markham, who's part of that student life lead team, has read the book, was part of those discussions. He led a seminar to help talk through the anxious generation, talk through what we're experiencing here. How do we help students navigate anxiety in the classroom, outside of the classroom? So lead teams talking about it, trying to push some of these ideas among our staff, among our faculty on the broader university campus. So that kind of leadership discussion is taking place to get us ready to engage these students who are feeling anxious. Our Res Life staff talking about these things with their resident assistants, the RAs in our dorms. How do they navigate some of these discussions? So all that, the leadership has to talk about these things. We have to work these things over in our minds so that we can come up with a solid plan. So some on the ground kind of practical things would be open door policies. If you have people know that they can come into my office. I have students. They're starting to figure that out. They don't have to be afraid. My door's open. They can walk in to my office. I have a couch in my office. They can sit there and study. They can sit there and talk to me. And I have that now. I have been here long enough and developed relationships with students where they actually just walk in and say, hey, I need to talk about some things, work through some things. I don't know what to do with my life type of questions. Or I've even had now students come in and say, hey, I need to confess. I've got things in my room I shouldn't have in my room. I'm going through some things that I need some help with. So these open door policies and building relationships where people feel the freedom to come and share their struggles, that's important. Those relational moves are really important for us. Talking with RAs about de-escalation, like how do we, or anybody on staff, how do we de-escalate, help students not catastrophize? I used that word earlier. Everything that goes wrong, you're gonna maybe fail an exam. Okay, well, you don't want to fail exams, but if you do, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Okay, you need to go back, study harder, do better on the next exam. You've seen where you've fallen short, but what's the worst thing that's going to happen here? So let's calm down, bring the temperature down, and have a lot of those types of conversations where kids get so panicked about things, and a lot of people do in their life, but kids get so panicked about things. Can we help them see that things aren't as bad as you think? And if you fail a class even, you'll just do it again. You just take the class over. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
We don't want people failing classes. It is not where you want to be. It's not a great thing, but it's also not the end of your life, right?
Right.
And so trying to help kids have, de-escalate, cool the temperature down, some of that stuff. One of the other things we're doing is maybe counterintuitive. A lot of people, a lot of kids have they don't know how to navigate relationships. This is a whole conversation about social media and what that's done to us. Haidt talks a lot about this, but there's a lot of relational tension. These relationships create anxiety. I don't know how to deal with my roommate. I don't know how to deal with the fact that my suite mate next door, they're always loud, whatever. So they want to run from that. They want to come and say, hey, can I switch rooms? Can I move to a different floor? And our kind of policy, kind of operating principle in residence life, that kind of arm of student life, is to say no. Not initially, sometimes you need to move. Sometimes the problems are so big. There's some really egregious things
Sure.
going on. We're happy we want to make sure to put people in safe situations, things like that. But at the same time, you need to learn to navigate problems. You need to learn to
Yeah.
navigate relational tension. So part of what we're trying to do to help students navigate anxiety is to help them actually navigate the anxiety, actually navigate the issue rather than run from it, because moving
Yeah.
geography doesn't necessarily help you grow as a person. And so we are trying to push into students like, hey, you're coming to us because you have a problem with your roommate. Have you talked to your roommate? Have you talked to your suite mate? And we would encourage you, before we get involved, you should be mature enough to have a conversation with that person. And then if it doesn't go well, come back to us. We'll get involved if we need to. But you need to start learning to navigate some of these things on your own, which pushes against some of the ways our culture and parents they step in to take care of the issue for their kid. Or they tell the kid they just get out of there, transfer schools, or leave, or move.
Well, just get the pervasive cultural, get, if you have difficult people, get them out of your life. Just don't have difficult people in your, which again, there are situations that you need to
Yeah,
separate from. Certainly, we're not trying to say it's just a blanket that you always need to, but we're way too quick
yeah.
to run. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't want to do that. We want you to learn to navigate the stress. I had a person in my office that talked about anxiety on their hall floor in their dorm, and it was just stressful, and they wanted to just run from it, move out. And I asked them what they wanted to, what their degree track was. I'm trying. Anytime I'm having conversations with students, I go, I want to know how long you've been here, where you're from, what are you studying. Just try to get to know them before we dive into the stuff. And they had told me they wanted to be a nurse and work in an ER. And then they're talking about the stress on their dorm floor, which was loud music or people talking loudly and whatever. And I thought, and I asked the person just kind of point blank, I'm like, do you think that learning to navigate some of that smaller, lower level anxiety and tension and stress and maybe even conflict would be worth learning how to do that before you walk into the emergency room where it's going to be really stressful, life and death perhaps? And so just trying to help students see, hey, learn to navigate in a relatively safe place, right? You have resident life staff, you've got student life staff, you're in a relatively safe place where you can learn to navigate these things before you launch into a world that's chaotic, that is stressful.
Yeah.
Anxiety is always going to be a part of your life. So we're trying to lean into some of that where we actually want to help you navigate anxiety, not merely remove you from every situation that causes you a little bit of stress. Because you can't go to your ER director or whoever sees your shift, your lead nurse or whatever, and say, hey, this is stressful. I think I want to transfer. I need to have the day off, or I need to transfer
Right.
to something else. It's you've got to learn to navigate that in your life. So we're trying to push into some of that stuff as well. We have on-site counseling. That's a practical thing, right? We have Kevin Markham, again, licensed counselor, developing a counseling network outside and around SBU where we're doing some
Right.
counseling on campus, but then also engaging some professionals, Christian counselors outside of SBU that are able to lean in, invest in students, a very practical thing that we do. So some of those things we're trying to navigate the stress of helping students navigate the stress of life through some of those avenues, and then just trying to get them out to have fun. Hey, let's
Yeah.
enjoy college life. Let's enjoy the
Yeah.
moment. Let's camp out on the forum, which we just did, the big camp out. Let's camp out on the forum. And while you're camping out, put your phone in a box and we'll put you in a drawing for a gift card, that sort of stuff. So let's enjoy the moments, enjoy these years because they will go by very quickly.
It's been awesome to see that culture be built of the fun, the joy, the excitement. We've talked about chapel multiple times and just how students are up front, they're worshiping, they're engaged. But it goes back to what you just said. I mean, that is just not an accident. It doesn't just happen. You're not just going to all of a sudden have that stuff happen. It's been very intentional planning, thinking, praying, and building these concepts into your team and then across campus, how we do that too, helping everyone on campus, from administration down to faculty, down to housekeepers, just being aware of our president, Dr. Melson, says a lot, student first. I mean, just being focused on trying to be there to serve the student and help them through whatever it is, and then doing it with joy. I mean, we want to have that same joy in what we're doing. It becomes infectious. I think if students can see, how much we enjoy being in community and being serving, using our gifts the way that we are, that it helps create an example for them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. I mean, I am confident it's making a difference in students' lives. You've been able to see transformation in students' lives, and as they work through these difficult things. And
yeah, it's really cool to see. I mean, we've seen people come to faith in Jesus. We're seeing people, ask Bible questions and locamente, and going to worship Jesus late at night on Thursdays. Chapel attendance is good. So we've been able to see a difference there. And again, it's all part of who we are as a university. We're about, not merely the classroom and educating the mind, but the whole person. And I really appreciate that about Dr. Manley, our provost, and Dr. Melson, and everybody on the team. Just a common desire to see not just conferring of degrees, but to see the raising of a certain type of person, right? Developing a certain type of person that's ready for the world, servant leaders, engaging the global society to make an impact for Christ. And we're all pulling that same direction. We're not merely trying to get people through a degree program, but to develop them as people. And so being able to come alongside the academic team, being able to come alongside our Success Center, and to see students growing, yes, intellectually growing as they're trying to figure out their degree paths and their future vocations, but also growing as human beings, growing in their ability to navigate stress, to navigate relationships, to navigate anxiety. That's all part of the college experience at SBU, and thrilled to be a part of it.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, good luck again on your presentation to tomorrow. You feel ready? You got any more fine tuning you got to do, or
what I need to do? Yeah, I feel fine. I feel like the presentation's too long, right? So I can't read 21 pages. So tomorrow morning, I will set aside some time to go through and figure out, I'll mark on the paper, summarize this section, or just summarize this, or skip this paragraph. So I'll figure out what I need to actually read. And because I need to leave time for Q&A at the end of my session. So yeah, I'll be ready. I've just got to figure out how to present it the best way to where I don't lose time and I get through all of it. But really more concerned about interacting with any questions, feedback from people in the room than I am getting through the whole thing.
Yeah, you can't control the questions, unfortunately. That's
okay. I'm looking forward to that. And I've
just got to respond.
Yeah, it's been pretty neat. I've walked around and saw some people that, I saw you yesterday. I had two different groups, one from Midwestern, a bunch of professors, and then another couple of guys that teach at a school in Kentucky, Southern Seminary, had asked me kind of to walk through what you were presenting, what's your kind of response to FESCO, so just being able to have some of those conversations walking around has helped me even prepare on the fly, so to speak.
Yeah. Cool.
So it's been good.
Well, we'll be off next week. We'll just have a break in episodes because campus will be closed. It's Thanksgiving break. We'll have different things happening, people traveling. So we'll have a episode back in 2 weeks, and man, it is going crazy fast because we're 3 weeks away now from graduation for the fall semester, which is wild. So it's gone real fast. We've got basketball tonight, men and women playing at home. So I'm hoping to get out and watch them a little bit. We'll have winter sports kicking off. So lots happening, but boy, it's been a fast semester for sure. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the recording. Thanks for chatting, and I'll see you next week.
Yep. Sounds good.